My name is Sonia McKnight. I'm 29 years old, and if I'm being honest, there are some things you never forget no matter how much time passes. The scent of your grandmother's house clinging to your hair, the way her fingers curled lightly when she held your hand as though she were afraid you'd slip away. The sound of her voice saying your name like it meant something precious. And then there are the things you wish you could forget. The smug tilt of your aunt's face at a funeral, the silence of a room waiting for a bomb to go off, and the first moment my grandmother's voice came through those speakers, slow, steady, deliberate, beginning a sentence that made every head in the church turn toward me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I live 3 states away now in a city where rent is a punchline and every coffee shop is filled with people pretending to write novels. I work in tech, one of those jobs that sounds impressive but mostly involves deadlines, bad lighting, and too many Slack notifications. I'd only been home twice in the last 5 years, once for my dad's back surgery, and the second time 3 months ago when my grandmother, Margaret Ellis, passed away. To understand why her funeral became a slow-motion disaster, you have to understand my family, or what's left of it. Grandma Margaret was unforgettable in the way carved stone is unforgettable. Sharp-edged, intentional. She believed in handwritten thank you notes in privacy, in not making a fuss about herself. She wasn't the warm cookie type. She showed affection through precision advice that cut straight to the point and clean and surgical. No fluff, no sugar. She raised 3 children in the house she lived in for nearly 60 years, outlived 2 husbands, held the title of matriarch with a kind of quiet authority that didn't soften with age. Fairness was everything to her, and fairness was where the cracks formed. My mom died when I was 12, a car accident. I don't talk about it, not because it hurts less now, but because it hurts the same. After that, it was just me and my dad. He tried, he really did, but he was built for utility, not finesse. Frozen dinners, laundry done only when he ran out of socks. Cleaning meant you can see the floor again. Grandma filled the gaps, picked me up from school, helped with homework, made sure I had shoes without holes, gave structure to chaos. I never moved in with her. My dad's pride wouldn't allow it. But we were there constantly, holidays, weekends, sick days. Dad has 2 sisters, Aunt Linda and Aunt Carol. Linda, the eldest, always behaved like her birth order came with a crown. She married, rich, had 2 kids, and carried an air of superiority like a designer handbag. Carol, the middle child, floated through life like a feather caught in the wrong wind. 3-week obsessions with yoga, then crystals, then essential oils, always accompanied by a new spiritual awakening and a new man. Neither sister was around much in Grandma's final years. They called occasionally, sent birthday cards if they remembered. But helping with doctor appointments, shoveling snow from her driveway, grocery runs, no. That was me, or became me. When I started working remotely 2 years ago, I spent more weekends with Grandma. Not because she asked. She would never. But age does things to a person, and I wasn't going to wait to be needed. I fixed her TV, did her grocery shopping, listened to her stories about the war. It felt simple, natural she raised me, so this was my turn. I didn't know some people would twist that into something else. The first hint came at Thanksgiving last year. Grandma insisted on hosting, even though the turkey was overcooked. The cranberry sauce still showed the shape of the can, and the mashed potatoes were lumpy. But it didn't matter. It was her table. You showed up. Linda arrived with her lemon-sucking husband Roger and their 2 adult children, who looked like they were too cool to be seen with their own family. Carol floated in, 90 minutes late, wrapped in a poncho that smelled like incense, dragging along a guy named Derek, who called himself a healing architect. Halfway through dinner, Grandma asked me to pass the sweet potatoes. I did. She smiled and squeezed my arm. That's when Linda lifted her glass eyes sharp. Sonia, you've really been inseparable from Mom lately, haven't you? I blinked. I guess so. Just helping where I can. Carol chimed in with a syrupy tone. It's sweet. Really sweet. Some people know how to make themselves very useful right before the will is read. Silence. I laughed nervously. Is that supposed to be a joke? Linda's smile stayed, but it was all teeth. No one's accusing you. You've just been spending a lot of time with her. It's admirable. Roger added, very noble. I felt Grandma's mood shift. Her mouth tightened the way it always did when she was angry, but restrained. After the meal, as I helped her put dishes away, I whispered, "Did that feel weird to you?" A shrug. They've always been threatened by anyone who gets more of my attention than they do. I wasn't trying to. I know, she said, patting my shoulder. That's the difference. I didn't bring it up again. A month later, she asked me to help scan old documents. She said she wanted her affairs in order. I assumed taxes. I didn't pry. And then came the day of the funeral. She passed peacefully in her sleep. I found her myself. I'd brought soup and bread from her favorite bakery. When she didn't answer the door, I let myself in. The funeral was held at her church, 40 years of attendance, 40 years of roots. It was packed. Neighbors, gardening club, friends, old co-workers. But the family section, that was another story. Linda arrived in a black pantsuit holding tissues she didn't use. Roger stiff beside her. Their children dressed like they were heading to a cocktail event. Carol stumbled in wearing sunglasses indoors, gripping Derek's arm. As I stood near the casket, I heard Linda whisper to her daughter, "Let her enjoy her little moment. She'll regret coming when she finds out Mom left her nothing." My stomach dropped. And then 10 minutes later, Mr. Cohen, Grandma's estate attorney, entered, holding a small black flash drive. "Your grandmother left a message," he said quietly. "For the whole family." The room shifted, air tightened. The projector screen lowered. The organ fell silent. And then her voice. "If you're watching this, then I'm no longer with you, which means I am finally free to speak my mind." A pin could have dropped and we'd all hear it. "Before I tell you what I've left each of you," she said, "let me tell you what you never knew about me." A ripple of dread moved across the pews. Linda stiffened. Carol's fingers twitched. Roger looked like someone had soured his coffee. The video played sharp, deliberate, unfiltered. She spoke of her children. She spoke of my mother. And then there's Sonia. My heart stopped. "You were never supposed to be my responsibility, but after your mother passed, I stepped in. And you never made me regret that." My throat tightened. The video paused abruptly. Mr. Cohen stood. That was only the preamble. There's more. The moment the first video cut off, the entire church inhaled at once. It was the kind of silence that feels like pressure, like the air itself is waiting to snap. Mr. Cohen adjusted his glasses, looking strangely unsettled. "As per Margaret's instructions," he said, "before we continue with the rest of the recording, I'm to distribute letters to each of her children." An usher stepped forward, carrying 3 sealed envelopes. One for Linda, one for Carol, and one addressed to Sarah McKnight in memoriam. That one was handed to me. My hands trembled. Linda tore hers open like it contained lottery results. Carol took hers, gingerly sliding a manicured finger under the seal with almost theatrical delicacy. I opened mine slowly. It felt sacred heavy in a way no paper should. It was short, just a single paragraph written in Grandma's looping perfect script. "Sarah, if you were still here, I would have given you everything. But since you're not, I give it to your daughter. She is the best of both of us." My heart clenched. My eyes burned. I couldn't breathe. Then, slam! The sound exploded through the church paper, smacking hard against wood. Linda had shot to her feet, her letter crushed in one hand. "This is outrageous," she barked, voice quivering with fury. She was senile, manipulated. This is insane." Gasps fluttered across the room. Even Roger looked alarmed, his lemon-sour expression faltering. Carol stood up too, sunglasses trembling. She didn't mean this." She stammered. It was the medication. She had moments of confusion near the end. Mr. Cohen cleared his throat. "Ladies, please. The video is not finished." Linda rounded on him. "Why are we even watching the circus? She's gone. Dead and you." Her fingers stabbed the air toward me, sharp as a knife. "You took advantage of her. You and your innocent act. Always hovering, always playing the devoted granddaughter. I saw right through it." My blood turned cold. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I never—" "Oh, please," she hissed, stepping closer. "You think we didn't notice all those weekends? Cooking for her, cleaning, running errands. What were you really doing? Sonia planting seeds, whispering that we were awful. I bet you wrote half of this for her." Carol's face crumpled as though she wanted to disappear entirely. Mr. Cohen lifted a hand. "Margaret anticipated this," he said calmly. He plugged the flash drive back in. The projector flickered. A new video appeared. This time, Grandma sat at her dining room table, the floral blouse she always saved for Sundays, her posture straight, calm, almost regal. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then I assume my children are already yelling, so let me make it simple." She held up a stack of papers, her will. "This document is notarized, witnessed, and legally binding. I was of sound mind and body. No one pressured me. And if you think anyone could pressure me into anything—" She gave a pointed look at the camera. "Then you clearly never knew me." The whispering behind me died instantly. "I am not punishing you," she continued. "I am being honest. Love doesn't mean enabling bad behavior, and it does not mean rewarding absence. Her fingers opened a small wooden box. Inside were 3 objects: a ring, a key, and a USB stick. Linda, she said, you get the Ellis family ring. Not because you deserve it, but because you value appearances more than truths. Linda's jaw dropped. Carol Grandma continued. You get the key to the lake house. I know you always dreamed of running away. Now you can try, but you'll find the mortgage statements inside. Running is harder than it looks. Carol blinked rapidly, stunned. Then, and Sonia, I felt every muscle in my body tense. You get everything else. Gasps rippled through the pews. Not just family strangers reacted too. You get the house, Grandma said. The savings, the investments, and most importantly, you get the truth. The rest is on this drive. The screen went black. A silence settled so heavy it felt like gravity. Linda sank into her seat slowly, stiff as stone. Carol followed, looking dazed. But Linda wasn't done. She curled forward, eyes narrowed into slits, voice low as venom. You'll regret this. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even swallow. Shock, guilt, fear, confusion, they all slammed into me at once. I didn't know what Grandma had meant by the truth. I didn't know what was on that drive. Not until later that night. And when I finally plugged it in, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered. That night, after the funeral crowd had thinned out and the condolences stopped sounding like condolences, I sat alone in my grandmother's house, the same place where I'd spent so many childhood weekends pretending time would never touch us. Now it felt hollow, a museum of silence. Her floral curtains swayed gently in the draft from the cracked kitchen window. The calendar on the wall was still turned to April, the month she died. On the last square in her handwriting it said, Sonia brings soup. My throat closed. I hadn't cried at the funeral, not when Linda called me a manipulator. Not when Grandma said she'd left me everything. But that little line, the reminder of a visit she never got to have, made my vision blur instantly. I sat at her dining table, the same spot where she'd filmed her final video, and took out the slim USB drive Mr. Cohen had handed me after the service. He'd leaned in close, his voice gentle behind the glasses. She wanted you to watch this alone, when you're ready. I wasn't ready, but I plugged it in anyway. A folder opened on the screen, dozens of subfolders labeled with dates, names, notes, scanned documents, letters, bank records, photos, and one folder titled For Sonia. I clicked it. A video loaded. There she was, Grandma sitting in her sunroom, wearing her old blue cardigan. The sunlight through the windows softened her edges, making her look older but peaceful, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Hi, sweetheart, she said. Her voice wasn't sharp here. It was warm. Private. If you're watching this, then everything's already been said, and I imagine you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe guilty. She shook her head gently. Don't! I held my breath. You didn't ask for any of this, Sonia. You earned it. And more importantly, you deserve it. Her smile flickered with a sadness I'd never seen. There were things I couldn't say while I was alive, not because I didn't want to, but because I was waiting for the right time. Now I think it's time you knew the whole truth. She leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice like she was letting me into something sacred. I was never supposed to raise 3 children. Your grandfather wanted to, but Linda wasn't planned. And I think I knew even before she turned 5 that something in her had hardened early. Hardened. The word rang in my chest like a bell. I tried to reach her, Grandma continued, but she always needed to be the smartest, the best, the center. And when she wasn't, she punished everyone around her. A long breath. Then, Carol was different, gentle at heart, but fear ruled her. She looked for rescue in every boy, every habit, every philosophy. Reinvention without responsibility isn't reinvention, it's running. My stomach twisted. And your mother, Grandma, said softly, eyes glistening, was the best of us. Compassionate, kind. She understood people. Losing her broke me. A silence fell in the video, heavy, real. But gaining you? Her smile warmed, watching you grow, seeing your mother in your eyes, in your sense of justice. That gave me hope again. I swallowed hard. My chest hurt. There's more on the drive, she said. Letters, documents, instructions. But what matters more is what you do after. Her gaze sharpened. I know Linda, and I know Carol. They won't accept this. They'll call you names, say you manipulated me. They may even try to contest the will. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. She was right about everything. Let them, Grandma continued. You don't owe them anything, not a cent, not an explanation. She paused, her voice turned firm. But you owe yourself a life you can be proud of, so live it. boldly. Then she reached forward as if to turn off the camera, but stopped. One last thing. Check the attic. There's a box with your name on it. You'll know it when you see it. The video ended. For several minutes, I just sat there listening to the house creak and settle like an old, tired body. The silence felt alive. Then, my phone buzzed. Linda. Straight to voicemail. Sonia, this is ridiculous. You don't understand how estates work. You don't know the pressure. Let's meet privately. Just you and me. Delete. Another voicemail. Carol. Hey, sweetie. I think there's been a misunderstanding. You know how Mom was near the end? Not entirely lucid. We should talk, as a family. Delete. For the next several days, I was drowning in paperwork, estate planning meetings, signatures, legal jargon, calls from banks. I felt like a kid playing dress-up in an adult world I didn't belong to. And the grief, it hit like a tidal wave. I stopped answering calls, stopped checking email, barely slept, barely ate. My boyfriend Evan called 3 times a day. Baby, please just tell me you're okay. I can drive down this weekend. Just say the word. I didn't answer most of those either. It wasn't that I didn't want him. I just didn't think I deserved comfort yet. One morning after a night of almost no sleep, I stepped outside to check the mail. Roger was standing on the porch, in a suit, holding a briefcase, like he'd come to conduct a hostile merger. We need to talk, he said. I don't think we do. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have a chance to show goodwill here, to be the bigger person. I crossed my arms. You mean what's fair to you? She raised 3 kids, he argued. She had 3 families. Splitting everything evenly is what honors her. No, I said firmly. What honors her is doing what she asked. She was clear. His jaw tightened. You'll regret this. I laughed once, cold and sharp. That's funny. That's what Linda said too. He turned, walking away, but not before muttering, You don't know who you're messing with. 2 days later, I got the legal notice. Linda and Carol were contesting the will, claiming I had exerted undue influence over Grandma. It was insulting. It was cowardly. And worst of all, it worked. For a few days at least. I spiraled. I felt small again, like the girl standing outside a locked bedroom door wondering what she'd done wrong. The once cozy house now felt haunted not by ghosts, but by expectations I couldn't meet. Then, one afternoon, searching for an old photo album, I opened the attic door and saw it. A cardboard box tucked behind blankets. My name written on it in faded marker. Sonia. My breath caught. I knelt and opened it. Inside were letters, photos, receipts, journal entries, health notes, records of every visit I'd made, every errand I ran, every repair, every day I cared for her. A binder at the bottom, for the courts if necessary. Something in me shifted. I wasn't helpless anymore. The next day I handed the binder to my lawyer. He flipped through it, eyes widening. This is a gold mine. We can end their case in 5 minutes. And he did. The judge dismissed the contest immediately. Neglect from them. Support from me. Facts don't lie. That night, I stood in Grandma's kitchen staring at the same calendar. Sonia brings soup. I felt strength bloom inside me like a seed cracking open. They had tried to take what wasn't theirs, tried to bury me. But Grandma had left me the truth, the tools, and a warning. When people show you who they are, believe them. I did. Now it was my turn to show them who I was. The morning after the court threw out my aunt's challenge, I woke up to find 2 things sitting neatly on my grandmother's porch. A bouquet of shriveled roses, their petals browned and curling inward, and a voicemail from Carol. We're not done. No greeting, no explanation, just a threat wrapped in 3 bitter syllables. But she was wrong. They were done. Now it was my turn. I hadn't planned revenge. At first, all I wanted was to breathe again, to settle into the quiet of my grief, without someone accusing me of manipulation or greed. But when they dragged me through court, smeared my name, tried to twist my love for Grandma into something sinister, something ugly, the anger fused into something steadier, sharper. Grandma had left me the truth, and I was going to use it. Her house was a living archive. Every drawer, every shelf, every dusty corner whispered stories she never said aloud. Over the next 3 weeks, I dove into all of it. Every morning started with coffee in her chipped floral mug, and every afternoon ended with me surrounded by boxes, papers, and old receipts spread across her dining room table like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. The picture that formed was devastating. Linda's so-called success was built on facades and borrowed money. Money she'd borrowed from Grandma over and over again. I found notes Grandma had written after their conversations, little paragraphs where she processed what Linda said, what she demanded. I found copies of checks Linda never repaid, A long letter from Grandma pleading with her to stop using her as a co-signer for personal credit lines. One note simply read, "Emotional pressure again. No more. This has to stop." Carol's folder was worse in a sadder way. Dozens of IOUs spanning 3 decades, some written on torn notebook paper, others on store receipts. Promises that she would pay Grandma back. Apologies, excuses, and a carefully kept spreadsheet that Grandma had created loan amounts, dates, reasons. The total came to over $72,000, all unpaid. And then there was the lake house, Carol's dream getaway, the place she bragged about for years, but rarely visited. The mortgage hadn't been paid off. Grandma had been keeping it afloat for her, and because the deed wasn't transferred yet, Carol couldn't sell it without my approval. Meanwhile, Linda had wasted no time getting the Ellis family ring appraised. Grandma kept the first appraisal in her files. The ring wasn't just sentimental, it was worth nearly $65,000. So much for her self-righteous rant about fairness. All at once, the roadmap formed clearly in my mind. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to threaten, I wasn't even going to confront them directly. I was going to do what Grandma would have done, be patient, be deliberate, and let the truth speak for itself. First, I made everything look peaceful. I wrote a public thank you letter to the town newspaper, the same one Grandma read every morning. I thanked the community for their support for honoring her memory. At the end, I mentioned something she always dreamed of, the Ellis Foundation, a small charity to help kids from single-parent homes, something meaningful, something honest. I created a website, designed a clean logo, crafted a mission statement, written in Grandma's style, roots in truth, blossoms in community. And then I made an announcement. We'd be hosting a garden dedication in Grandma's name, a restoration of the backyard garden she loved, but never had the energy to revive. Local news picked it up. Neighbors shared it. Council members RSVP'd. And naturally, both Linda and Carol received invitations. They weren't going to miss it. Not because they cared about Grandma, but because they couldn't risk the optics of being absent. Reputation was their religion. Evan, my boyfriend, saw the article online and called me. "Baby, I'm proud of you. Really proud." I wanted to take comfort in that, but part of me held back. His ex-girlfriend had reached out to him recently, sending messages that dripped with nostalgia and subtle flirtation. He swore nothing was happening, but grief makes everything feel more fragile. I wasn't ready to lean on him, not yet. Behind the scenes, I began laying the real groundwork. Anonymous packets were mailed to the Charity Gala's board of directors, containing copies of Linda's falsified financial statements and the years she'd listed Grandma as a dependent, even though she hadn't supported her at all. No accusations, no explanation, just the documents. Her own signatures did the talking. At the same time, I contacted the bank that held the lake house mortgage. I asked what would happen if the co-signer had passed and the primary owner failed to assume the debt. They told me exactly what I needed to know, foreclosure after 90 days. So I sent Carol a certified letter, polite and professional, informing her that the estate could no longer support payments and that she would need to assume the mortgage if she wanted to keep the property. I knew she couldn't, and I knew Linda wouldn't help her. Linda didn't help anyone unless she could leverage it later. A week before the garden dedication, my phone rang. It was Linda's voice, sharp and brittle. "What do you want from all of this, Sonia? What's the point?" I stayed quiet. The letters, the charity, the rumors. You're poking the bear. "I'm honoring Grandma's wishes," I said, her breath hitched with fury. "You're making enemies you can't afford." "I'm not making enemies," I replied gently. "I'm revealing the truth. If that bothers you, maybe ask yourself why." She hung up. 2 days later came a voicemail from Carol. Her voice trembled. "Sonia, please, help me. I'm drowning. We could sell the lake house together. Split the profit. Please, we're family." I didn't respond. Then Roger called, leaving a message that sounded like a threat disguised as advice. "If you don't stop dragging Linda through the mud, we'll go public with everything. You won't enjoy the fallout." I ignored him too. 3 days before the event, I found a manila envelope on my porch with no return address. Inside was a copy of a letter Linda had sent Grandma 10 years ago begging for money to cover a business shortfall. Attached was a bank statement showing she'd spent the exact same amount on a luxury resort. It was anonymous, but I knew who it was from, Grandma. Even now she was protecting me. The garden dedication wasn't going to be a tribute. It was going to be a reckoning. The morning of the garden dedication felt suspiciously calm, like the kind of quiet that settles right before a storm breaks. The sky was a soft, forgiving blue, and the air had that perfect early summer breeze that carries the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. It should have felt peaceful, but my pulse thudded like warning drums under my skin. The Ellis garden, once tangled, forgotten, half dead, looked reborn. Rows of lilies, lavender, and daisies framed a newly laid stone path that wound toward the old bench my grandmother loved. We'd restored it and added a brass plaque to the back, in loving memory of Margaret Ellis, a life rooted in truth. People began arriving just after 11. Neighbors, town council members, old church friends, a local reporter adjusting her tripod near the oak tree where I'd placed a small podium. They smiled at me, murmured condolences, thanked me for organizing such a beautiful tribute. And then came Linda and Carol. Linda wore black again, as if the world should remain in mourning, until she decided otherwise. Roger hovered behind her like a gloomy shadow. Carol wore a floppy sun hat and enormous sunglasses that made her look like she was trying to hide from the daylight itself. She kept glancing around nervously as though the wind carried accusations instead of air. "Sonia, this is beautiful," Carol whispered, reaching for a hug. I stepped back just enough to keep it polite. "I'm glad you came." Linda didn't offer a greeting. She didn't even pretend. "You're making a fool of yourself," she muttered while passing by. I smiled. "Then this will be entertaining, won't it?" Guests gathered. The murmur of voices softened. When I took my place at the podium at noon, my palms were cool against the wood, my breath steadied. "Thank you all for being here," I began. My grandmother loved this town. She loved this garden. And she believed that truth, especially uncomfortable truth, should always be spoken out loud. I felt Linda tense from across the crowd. "Good," I continued. "Some of you may know there were disputes after her passing. Legal disputes, accusations, threats." A hush fell. I let my gaze drift briefly toward Linda and Carol. Both froze like statues pinned under sunlight. "But Margaret Ellis was prepared," I said, lifting a small folder from the podium. "She left behind documents, letters, receipts, things she wanted preserved. Today, in the interest of transparency and closure, I want to share one of them." "This is inappropriate," Linda snapped, surging to her feet. People turned. The reporter instinctively raised her camera. Someone whispered, "What is she doing?" Roger touched Linda's arm, trying and failing to calm her. She refused to sit. "You're free to leave, Aunt Linda," I said gently. "But this is my event, and I'm honoring Grandma's wishes." Roger pulled her down into her seat with a stiff, embarrassed motion. I unfolded the letter. The paper trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. "To whom it may concern, I read. If you are reading this, then I am no longer alive, and my granddaughter Sonia is facing the consequences of telling the truth." A woman in the front row touched her heart. "For years, I gave more than I should have to people who returned nothing but excuses. My eldest Linda borrowed under false pretenses, claiming business emergencies while spending that money on vacations." Gasps. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. "She threatened to keep her children away from me if I didn't comply." The crowd's reaction grew louder, an ugly collective inhale. "My middle child, Carol, took loans for decades without repayment, then told others I was emotionally abusive when I asked for accountability." Someone whispered, "My God." I kept records. I continued, not to shame them, but to protect Sonia, the only one who ever came without wanting something. My throat tightened. I folded the letter gently. The breeze ruffled the edges as if Grandma herself exhaled. "This garden," I said, "softly exists because she believed truth should be planted openly, that we should all be willing to stay for the harvest." Linda shot up again. "Enough. You don't get to stand here and pretend you're some saint," she shouted. "You poisoned her against us." "Stop," Roger hissed, pulling at her sleeve. "No," she barked. "I won't sit quietly while this fraud pretends she's—" I reached into the folder again before she could finish. I held up a scanned copy of a letter, her letter. "This is a request you sent my grandmother 6 years ago," I said calmly. "You asked for $20,000 for a home renovation." I flipped the next page. "And this is the statement showing you spent the money on a luxury cruise." The crowd erupted in whispers. Linda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I held up the final sheet. "Grandma wrote here, denied future requests, trust broken." Someone in the back clapped once, then another, then a third. And the applause spread, not loud or theatrical, but solid, supportive, like approval from people who'd spent years watching this family dynamic unfold without being able to say anything. Carol slowly rose to her feet, trembling. "I didn't know she kept records," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't know. She kept everything I said. because she believed people should live with the consequences of their choices. Linda's face flushed a deep, furious red. She grabbed her purse, turned on her heel, and stormed off her heels, stabbing the ground with each step. Roger followed silently, pale and stiff. Carol lingered. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but I could see her mouth quiver. "You could have told me," she whispered. "You could have warned me." "I gave you letters," I said softly. "You just didn't open them." She nodded once finally in acknowledgement and walked away. I breathed in, then faced the crowd again. My grandmother used to say, "Don't plant seeds if you're not willing to stay for the harvest." I looked out over the garden, over the flowers blooming in the soil she once tended with shaking hands. "She planted this," I said. "Every act of kindness, every truth she protected, every hour she spent raising me when no one else stepped up. This garden didn't bloom overnight. It bloomed because of her." When I stepped away from the podium, people approached, some wiping tears, others offering stories about Grandma's kindness. Neighbors, old friends, even strangers who had only known her by reputation. The local paper ran a story the next morning. The video went semi-viral in town. "Truth blooms in the Ellis Garden." And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Peace. In the weeks after the garden dedication, the town shifted in quiet, unmistakable ways. People I barely knew waved at me in the grocery store. Older neighbors dropped off small things, cookies, flowers, handwritten notes that said things like, "She'd be proud of you." Even the barista at the coffee shop I used to visit whispered, "I saw the video. Good for you." It was strange being seen. Strange in a way that didn't feel invasive. Strange in a way that felt earned. Meanwhile, my aunts unraveled. Linda resigned from her charity positions within a week. Not gracefully. No, she claimed health issues, claimed unfortunate misunderstandings, claimed personal matters. But everyone already knew the truth. Her reputation, the thing she cherished most, cracked like a porcelain vase, held together with too much glue. Carol's lake house went into foreclosure. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile when I saw the listing online. I simply stared at the photos, the deck peeling. The windows fogged with neglect, and felt a final gentle closing inside myself. It wasn't revenge. It was gravity. Consequences falling exactly where they were always meant to. There were no more voicemails, no more threats, no more dead flowers on my porch. Silence can be violent when it comes from the wrong people, but this silence felt clean. I stayed in Grandma's house for a while longer, not because I needed to, but because leaving felt too abrupt. It was a transition, a bridge between who I had been and who I was becoming. I preserved half the house just the way she left it. Her bedroom, her reading nook, her sunroom with the old blue chair. I would sit there sometimes late at night sipping tea and letting the softness of the space settle into my bones. Grief doesn't go away. It just becomes a companion that learns to walk quietly beside you. The other half of the house I transformed. Files, documents, and old furniture made room for clean desks, shelves, and the beginnings of something she had always dreamed about, but never had the time or energy to create. The Ellis Foundation. We awarded our first set of scholarships within the month, 5 students from single-parent households each with a story that tugged at me in a different way. When I read their essays, when I saw their faces light up as they received the news, something inside me unlocked. It felt like planting something in fertile soil. Evan showed up unexpectedly one Friday evening. I opened the door to find him standing there with a suitcase in hand, looking exhausted from the 5-hour drive, but determined. "I needed to see you," he said. I hesitated. For days I'd been unsure about letting him back in, about whether I wanted to. The whole ordeal with his ex texting him during the chaos had left a knot in my chest I hadn't untangled yet. But he stepped forward gently, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Sonia," he said quietly, "I didn't know how much you were carrying. I should have come sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." I exhaled. He didn't reach for me. He didn't push. He waited. That mattered. I stepped back and nodded toward the living room. "Come in." That night, we sat in Grandma's sunroom, the scent of her old lavender sachets faint in the air. Evan eventually took my hand slowly, carefully, and rested it on his knee. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said. And for the first time in months, I let myself lean into someone. Not to collapse, not to hide, but to rest. In the days that followed, life slowly rebuilt itself around new rhythms. I spent mornings organizing foundation plans, afternoons meeting with community partners, evenings walking through the garden as the flowers bloomed higher and brighter each day. One evening, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found a small envelope I hadn't noticed before. My name was written on it in Grandma's handwriting. Inside was a single line: "Don't forget to live your own life. Love, Mom and me." I pressed it to my chest, letting the weight of it sink deep. My mother's absence, Grandma's guidance, my aunt's bitterness, the legal battles, the accusations, they had all shaped me into something harder, yes, but also something clearer, something rooted. The next weekend, I invited the scholarship students and their families to the garden. I watched them laugh, take photos near the bench, smell the lavender sit under the oak tree. The space wasn't haunted anymore. It felt alive. Later that night, as I stood on the back porch with the soft hum of crickets in the air, I whispered into the breeze, "I hope I'm doing this right." There was no voice answering back, no sign, just the steady warmth of the evening. But somehow, that was enough. People think inheritance is about money. It isn't, not really. She left me the truth. She left me clarity. She left me the freedom to build something better than what she endured. And she left me a garden that taught me the simplest lesson. When people try to bury you, they're not always burying you. Sometimes they're planting you. And I finally bloomed.